On January 12, 1973, just after midnight, Elvis Presley dialed James Brown from a dim hotel room at the Las Vegas Hilton. He thought it would be a simple check-in between friends, but the truth was devastating. What Brown heard in Elvis's voice that night shook him and shaped music history forever. The neon lights outside the Las Vegas Hilton stretched across the curtains like soft pink lightning. Inside Suite 3002, the world felt strangely quiet for a building packed with thousands of guests. The hallway noise was gone. The cheering from the casino floors below had faded. Even the ringing in Elvis Presley's ears, something that usually stayed long after shows, was softer tonight. It was 12:07 a.m., and the king of rock and roll sat alone on the edge of his bed. His black jacket lay crumpled on the floor beside a pair of worn boots. The air conditioner hummed with a slow, steady rhythm, pushing a cool draft that brushed against scattered papers on the nightstand. One of the pages fluttered every few seconds, like a heartbeat trapped in ink. Elvis rubbed his throat gently. The show earlier that night had gone well, at least from the outside. Nearly 18,000 people filled the Hilton showroom, clapping and calling out his name. The bright lights hid the exhaustion in his eyes, but he felt it now, sinking into him as the room grew quieter. A cracked tape recorder sat on the dresser. He had tried to lay down a rough idea after the show, but his voice felt strained. Not physically strained, emotionally strained. His vocal cords felt fine. His mind didn't. That was the part he couldn't easily fix. He picked up a cup of cold coffee and took a sip, wincing at the bitterness. The taste didn't bother him as much as the stillness. He wasn't used to this kind of silence. Silence made his thoughts louder. Silence made the truth harder to ignore. Beside the lamp, his notebook lay open. One page was covered in scribbles, short thoughts, half-lines of lyrics, quick notes about tomorrow's rehearsal. But none of it made him feel steady. None of it made him feel like himself. He sighed quietly, letting the air escape like a slow leak in a balloon. Why do the quietest hours reveal the loudest fears? Why does midnight feel heavier than any stadium in the world? Elvis reached for the phone on the nightstand. His hand hovered over the numbers. He knew James Brown was still awake. Brown almost never slept early after performing. He would be at his club in Augusta, maybe finishing a jam session, maybe laughing with his band. James always carried a powerful energy, a fire that didn't dim easily. Elvis needed some of that fire. His fingers trembled slightly. He knew he shouldn't feel nervous. James was a friend, someone who understood crowds, pressure, fame, fear, better than almost anyone. But this wasn't a normal call, and Elvis knew it. Something inside him was sliding, slowly, like loose earth before a landslide. He took a breath. The air felt thicker than before. A distant horn from the street below echoed faintly. A stack of ticket stubs on the dresser shifted as the AC kicked harder. The room felt alive, as if it were pushing him to make a choice. Elvis wiped his palms on his pants. He didn't want to sound weak. He didn't want to sound lost. But pretending wasn't helping anymore. He looked at his reflection in the darkened TV screen. His face seemed heavier than it had during the concert. Tired eyes. A slight slump in his shoulders. A man who felt his own legend slipping away. He reached toward the phone again. His fingers touched the receiver. He hesitated. Would James understand? Would he think less of him? What would you do if you were standing there, alone, holding the phone, afraid of the truth you're about to speak? Elvis closed his eyes. He inhaled slowly. The moment stretched. Then he pressed the call button. The line began to ring in the silence, each tone echoing like a countdown. Something was shifting in the night. Something that would not be forgotten. The phone rang through the quiet streets of Augusta, Georgia, slicing through the warm late-night air around the third rail, James Brown's club. Inside, the last notes of a jam session still floated in the room. Musicians were packing up amps, wiping sweat from their faces, joking about missed chords. Brown himself wiped his brow with a white towel, still buzzing from the crowd of about 240 people who had filled the place earlier. He was halfway through telling his drummer a funny story when the phone behind the bar rang again. The bartender yelled, James, it's for you. Brown raised an eyebrow. Calls after midnight were usually business. Promoters, managers, sometimes fans who somehow got the number. He walked over casually, still smiling, towel around his neck. Yeah, talk to me, Brown said. He expected the usual. But the moment he heard the voice on the other end, his expression changed instantly. Elvis? He whispered. There was a pause, a shaky breath, a strange heaviness in the silence before Elvis spoke again. Hey, James. Not hey, brother. Not how you feelin', man. Just a slow, tired hey, James. Something was wrong. Brown motioned for the band to quiet down. He stepped outside, pushing the back door open and letting the cold January air hit his face. The alley was dim, lit only by a flickering streetlight. He pressed the phone tighter to his ear. Elvis, you all right? Brown asked. Another pause. A longer one. Brown heard the sound of breathing. Unsteady, uneven. Then Elvis finally said, I don't think I can keep doing this. Brown froze. Those 9 words cut through him like a blade. Elvis didn't talk like that. Not to him. Not to anyone. The king was the one who lifted other people. He wasn't the one who broke like this. Brown leaned against the brick wall, trying to stay calm. What's going on, man? Talk to me. But Elvis didn't answer right away. Brown could hear soft sounds in the background. A humming AC unit, the faint buzz of neon, maybe the clink of a cup being moved. It didn't sound like a lively hotel suite. It sounded like a man sitting alone in a too-quiet room. Elvis, you drinking? Brown asked gently, though he already felt it wasn't that. Elvis's voice didn't sound drunk. It sounded tired, scared, lost. No, Elvis whispered. It's not that. It's something else. Brown's heart pounded. He stepped deeper into the alley where it was darker, colder. He needed to focus. What happened tonight? Brown asked. You had a show, right? Yeah, Elvis said. Big crowd. Good reaction. But, Brown pushed softly. Elvis exhaled shakily. But I felt empty, like the sound was loud, but I couldn't feel any of it. Brown shut his eyes. That wasn't normal. That wasn't performance fatigue. That was something heavier, something dangerous. Elvis, he said, voice low. Tell me exactly what's happening. Silence again. A long silence. Then a soft, broken confession. James. I'm slipping. And nobody sees it. Brown's grip tightened on the phone. The streetlight flickered overhead. A cold breeze slid between them, carrying the weight of Elvis's words. Have you ever heard someone sound like they're standing on the edge of something you can't see? Have you ever felt fear through a phone line? Brown swallowed hard. His breath fogged in the cold night air. This wasn't a casual call. This was a man reaching out because he didn't know where else to go. Brown whispered, Elvis, stay with me. Don't hang up. Elvis didn't respond. Not for a moment that felt far too long. Something was shifting, and Brown could feel the night change. Cold air hung around James Brown as he stood in the alley behind the third rail. He pressed the phone tighter to his ear, trying to catch every sound coming from Elvis's suite at the Las Vegas Hilton. On the other end, Elvis paced slowly, his footsteps tapping softly against the carpeted floor. Brown heard the faint shuffle of bare feet, the rustle of fabric, and the low hum of the air conditioner. Those tiny sounds told him more than Elvis's words did. Something was spiraling. Elvis? Brown said quietly. You gotta talk to me, man. Elvis inhaled sharply. I don't know where to start. Anywhere, Brown replied. Just start. There was another long pause. Brown could almost picture Elvis standing in the dim glow of the hotel lamps, looking down at the phone cord wrapped around his fingers. That hesitation, the slow breathing, the quiet swallowing, wasn't normal. Not for the man who commanded stadiums. Elvis finally spoke. Everything feels heavy. Heavy how? Brown asked. Like I'm losing pieces of myself, Elvis whispered. That sentence hit Brown like a punch. He stepped farther into the alley, away from the club door, needing space to think. His breath rose like smoke in the cold night. What happened tonight? Brown asked again. Elvis paced. Brown could hear the muffled creak of the bed as Elvis sat down, then stood up again. He was restless, anxious. "It wasn't the show," Elvis said. "It was after. Talk to me." "There was a moment," Elvis continued, "right after the curtain closed. I walked backstage, and I felt nothing. No ruse, no fire, just emptiness." Brown frowned deeply. "That's not like you." "I know," Elvis said, his voice cracking slightly. "That's what scares me." Another pattern breaker slipped through. "I don't feel like Elvis anymore." Brown stopped breathing for a moment. "Elvis," he said slowly, "listen, you're tired, overworked." "No." Elvis cut in gently. "It's deeper." The quiet in his voice carried a frightening honesty. Brown felt a chill run through him. Then Elvis said something that made Brown stop walking mid-step. "It feels like the music's slipping out of my hands." The words hung between them, heavy and raw. Brown leaned against the brick wall, steadying himself. He had heard fear from bandmates before, but never from Elvis Presley. Not like this. Inside Suite 3002, Red West knocked lightly on the door. Brown heard it through the phone. A soft thump followed by Red's muffled voice. "Elvis? You need anything?" Elvis covered the receiver. "I'm fine, Red. Just give me a minute." Brown heard the door click shut again. "Elvis," Brown said, "that man is worried about you." "He shouldn't be," Elvis replied. "Nobody should. I'm supposed to be strong." "You ain't supposed to be anything but human," Brown said. Elvis didn't answer. "What else is going on?" Brown asked softly. Elvis walked closer to the window. Brown heard the curtain move. Then Elvis said, "The crowd still cheer, James. But when the lights hit me, I feel like I'm watching myself from far away." Brown felt a weight in his chest. "That's not fading," he said. "That's pressure." "It feels like I'm drowning," Elvis confessed. Brown pressed his hand to his forehead. He had never heard Elvis speak like this, never heard the king sound like a man standing on the edge of something dark. "Elvis," Brown whispered, "you need to breathe." "I'm trying." Brown took a deep breath himself, hoping Elvis would hear the steadiness. "You called me for a reason." "I think I just needed someone to know," Elvis said. "Know what?" Brown asked gently. Elvis's voice lowered to almost nothing. "I'm scared, James." Brown closed his eyes. This was no longer a conversation. This was a lifeline. "Elvis," he said, voice tightening with urgency, "you stay with me right now. Don't go anywhere. You hear me?" There was silence on the line. Then, a shaky, broken whisper. "I don't know how much longer I can hold myself together." Brown straightened. His voice sharpened. "Elvis, listen to me." But before he could say more, something shifted in Elvis's breathing. Something that changed the entire direction of the night. James Brown stood motionless in the alley, eyes fixed on nothing, phone pressed hard against his ear. Elvis's shaky breathing filled the line, uneven and haunting. Brown felt the cold January wind wrap around him. But the chill inside him came from something deeper. He had never heard Elvis sound like this, never heard the king tremble. "Elvis," Brown whispered, "talk to me." A long, painful silence followed. Then Elvis finally said it, soft, broken, honest. "I'm scared I'm fading." Brown stopped breathing for a second. That one sentence carried more weight than any scream. He pushed himself off the wall, pacing quickly through the alley, boots hitting the pavement in sharp taps. "Elvis," he said, voice firming, "listen to me." Another shaky breath from Elvis. "You are not done," Brown snapped. His words came fast, sharp, controlled. They weren't gentle. They weren't soft. They were lifelines thrown with force. "Stay with me." Elvis didn't answer. Brown could hear the rustle of Elvis moving, maybe stepping away from the window, maybe sitting on the edge of the bed again. Brown pictured the dark hotel suite, the neon glow leaking in, Elvis hunched over with the phone pressed to his forehead. "Elvis?" Brown said again. "You hear me?" Faint yes slipped through. Brown nodded to himself. He needed to pierce through the fear gripping Elvis. You think fading is what this is? No, this is exhaustion, pressure, loneliness talking louder than music. Elvis breathed out slowly. It feels real. Everything feels heavier at midnight, Brown said. But heavy ain't the same as over. There was another pause. Brown could almost feel Elvis weighing the words in his hands. In Vegas, Elvis grabbed the phone cord with trembling fingers. His heart was pounding too hard, too fast. He whispered, "I can't feel the fire." Brown didn't hesitate. "Then we're gonna find it again." "How?" Elvis asked, voice cracking. "You trust me," Brown said. "Just for tonight." Elvis swallowed hard. "I don't know if I can." "Yes," Brown said. "You can." His voice dropped low, steady. "You called me for a reason." Elvis closed his eyes. He barely realized he was nodding. Brown stepped closer to the streetlight, letting the glow hit his face. "Now listen close, because I'm only gonna say this once." Elvis held his breath. "You've carried the world on your shoulders for too long," Brown said. "But even the strongest man needs someone to carry him for a minute." Elvis felt something shift inside him. Not relief, just the beginning of one. Brown continued, "You ain't allowed to give up tonight. Not on me. Not on yourself." Elvis looked down at his shaking hand. "I feel like I'm disappearing." "You aren't," Brown said. "You're tired. There's a difference." Elvis's voice trembled. "James?" "What?" "I don't know who I am right now." Brown inhaled deeply. "Then let's find you." "How?" Elvis whispered again. Brown's tone changed. Sharp, commanding, the way he spoke to musicians slipping off tempo. "Go to the dresser," he said. Elvis blinked. "Why?" "Just do it." Elvis slowly rose, phone pressed to his ear. His steps were soft, dragging slightly across the carpet. "I'm here," Elvis said quietly. "Good," Brown replied. "Now pick up that cracked rehearsal tape." Elvis reached for it with trembling fingers. Brown's voice dropped low. "We're gonna start with the truth." Elvis exhaled, unsure, afraid but listening. And Brown was about to change the entire night. Elvis stared at the cracked rehearsal tape in his hand. The plastic casing felt cold, almost fragile, as if it might fall apart with one wrong squeeze. He held the phone between his shoulder and ear, breathing shakily. James Brown waited on the other end, silent but solid, like a man bracing himself to pull someone out of deep water. "Elvis?" Brown said quietly. "Put it in the player." Elvis hesitated. The room seemed to lean in around him. The neon glow from the Hilton sign outside flickered against the wall. His heart thumped unevenly, each beat louder than it should have been. "Go on," Brown urged. Elvis slid the tape into the recorder. His fingers trembled as he pressed the stiff play button. A soft click filled the room, followed by a long hiss, raw, scratchy, almost ghostly. Then the recording began. It was Elvis's voice from earlier that night, but stripped bare. No audience, no lights, no band to hide behind. Just him, breath shaking, notes wavering, emotion seeping through every word. Elvis flinched at the first cracked note. "Turn it up," Brown said. Elvis reached for the volume knob, twisting it slowly. The sound swelled, filling the room with a version of himself he didn't like hearing. He pressed his hand over his mouth, embarrassed by the cracks, the missed breaths, the vulnerability. Brown didn't let him hide. "That," Brown said firmly, "isn't fading." Elvis shook his head. "It sounds broken." "It sounds alive," Brown corrected. "It sounds like a man who cares." Elvis closed his eyes, listening. The tape hissed again between phrases. The recording wasn't clean. It wasn't polished. It was human, painfully human. "Why are you making me hear this?" Elvis whispered. "So you understand something," Brown said. "When a man is truly fading, he ain't fighting. But you're fighting every second in that tape." Elvis swallowed hard. "It doesn't feel like fighting." "Because you're tired," Brown said. "But tired ain't the same as finished." Elvis lowered himself onto the chair near the window, gripping the phone tightly. His voice trembled. "I don't know if I can keep this up." Brown's tone sharpened. "You don't have to keep it up alone." Elvis looked at the tape recorder as another shaky vocal came through. He winced again, but something inside him softened. The rawness felt honest. Painful but honest. Brown continued, "You called me because you needed truth. So here it is, your fire ain't gone. It's buried under weight." Elvis whispered, "What if I can't lift it?" "You will," Brown said. "With help." A long silence passed as the tape played on, exposing every crack, every rough breath. Elvis listened, really listened, for the first time, and in the messiness of that recording, he heard something familiar. A spark, faint but still burning. "James?" Elvis whispered, voice trembling. "What do I do?" Brown exhaled slowly, choosing his words. "You make me one promise." Elvis's heart tightened. "What promise?" "That tomorrow morning," Brown said, "you start again. Fresh. No pretending. No hiding. You walk into rehearsal like this tape matters." Elvis stared at the recorder, breath uneven. "And if I can't?" "You can," Brown said. "Say the words." Elvis hesitated. Brown repeated, quietly but firmly, "Say the words." Elvis finally answered in a soft, breaking voice, "I promise." Brown exhaled with visible relief. And the moment the words left Elvis's mouth, something shifted, small, but powerful. The night had changed him. The sun rose slowly over Las Vegas, spilling pale orange light across the windows of the Las Vegas Hilton. Inside Suite 3002, Elvis sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the cracked rehearsal tape he had played the night before. The room felt different now. Not lighter, just clearer, as if the fog had lifted enough for him to finally see himself. Across the country, James Brown was still awake too. He sat alone in a back office at the third rail, elbows on his knees, replaying every second of their call. He kept hearing Elvis's promise. He kept hearing the tremble in his voice. But he also heard something else. Something he hadn't heard from Elvis in months. A spark. Later that morning, Elvis surprised his entire team. He walked into rehearsal early, holding the cracked tape in one hand. Red West watched him closely, expecting exhaustion, frustration, or withdrawal. Instead, Elvis stood taller. His shoulders weren't slumped. His voice wasn't shaking. "Let's start from the top," Elvis said. The band exchanged glances. Something was different. Not dramatic, not loud, just awake. As they began to play, the energy in the room shifted. Elvis pushed harder, correcting himself, digging into the notes. Every breath felt intentional. Every lyric had weight. It wasn't perfection. It wasn't polished. But it was alive. Word spread quietly among the Hilton staff. A maid wrote in her small diary, later discovered by collectors, "Mr. Presley practicing at 3:15 a.m., louder than usual. Sounded like he was trying to prove something to the walls." The truth was simple. He was. In the weeks that followed, Elvis made small but powerful changes. He adjusted set lists, cutting certain songs and adding others he felt connected to. He asked the band to rehearse more deeply. He spent late nights alone at the piano, playing softly, letting emotion guide him instead of pressure. Behind the scenes, people whispered, "What got into Elvis? He's different. He's focused again." No one knew about the call. Brown never bragged. Elvis never credited him publicly. Some moments aren't meant for crowds. Some moments change people privately, like a quiet flame burning behind a closed door. After Elvis's passing in 1977, Brown was asked during an interview if he and Elvis were close. Brown looked down, took a breath, and said only one sentence. "He had more fire than he believed." That one line became a mystery. Fans debated what it meant. Insiders traded theories. A few even claimed Brown had kept a tape of the call, which he never confirmed. Whether that tape existed or not didn't matter. The truth was deeper than any recording. Years later, fans began leaving small notes and scarves outside the Las Vegas Hilton. By the late 1990s, hotel staff agreed to install a plaque on the wall near the suite's old hallway entrance. The call that sparked the fire, January 12, 1973. Visitors touched the plaque like it carried warmth. Some whispered prayers. Some left guitar picks. Some left handwritten promises, echoing the vow Elvis spoke into the phone that night. The world never heard the full call, but its ripples stretched far past a single midnight moment. Because sometimes history changes quietly, through a voice trembling on a phone line, and a friend who refuses to let that voice fall. And one more ripple was still waiting. In the quiet years that followed, the story of Elvis's midnight call lived only in whispers. The Hilton staff remembered the sudden shift in his rehearsals. A few musicians noticed how he carried himself with a new steadiness. And James Brown, who could command crowds of thousands, kept that single night locked deep in his chest like a promise he refused to break. People saw the performances. They saw the costumes, the lights, the crowds. But they never saw what happened in the dark hotel room when Elvis finally admitted the truth he'd hidden from everyone else. They never heard his trembling breath or the fear in his voice when he whispered that he felt himself disappearing. Most people never hear legends sound human. Elvis had spent years giving energy to everyone. Fans, musicians, strangers. But that night, he needed someone to give strength back to him. And Brown did something rare. He didn't let Elvis down easy. He didn't offer soft comfort. He gave him honesty strong enough to break through the fog. Why is it that the strongest people often hide the deepest cracks? And how many moments in history changed because someone picked up the phone instead of letting it ring? As time went on, that midnight conversation became more than a private exchange between two icons. It became a quiet reminder of what connection can do. Elvis didn't rise the next day as a brand new man, but he rose with purpose. He kept the promise he made. He walked into the rehearsal room the way Brown told him to, open, awake, willing to fight for the music he feared he was losing. That promise is what fans still feel in certain recordings from that year. There's a rawness, a spark, a grit that wasn't there before. It is the sound of a man choosing to keep going. After Elvis was gone, Brown spoke gently about him. He never revealed details. He never told the full story. He only said enough for people to understand that the king had more strength than the world ever realized. Decades later, visitors at the Las Vegas Hilton pause at the plaque honoring that night. Some touch the metal softly. Some whisper the date. Some imagine the two voices crossing the country's midnight air. One trembling, one steady, both changing each other in ways no one else would ever witness. Because the story isn't about fame. It isn't about music charts. It isn't even about history. It's about one human being reaching out and another choosing to answer. That's the real legacy of the call. And that truth is why the story survives. If the story moved you, share it with someone who's carried more weight than they let the world see. Moments like these remind us how powerful one honest conversation can be. Tell us below, which Elvis song still reaches you the deepest? And if you're ready for another untold legend, there's a new story waiting.